The Letters We Never Sent. In a quiet village nestled between golden hills and winding rivers, lived a girl named Alara. She was the daughter of the town's only librarian and spent most of her days in the library, dusting shelves and falling in love with characters from books. She believed that true love was the kind of thing that existed only between pages, timeless, poetic, but not quite real. Then came Aiden. He arrived in the village in late spring, carrying nothing but a backpack and a notebook filled with songs he never finished. He was a wandering musician, drawn to the silence of the village, hoping to find his rhythm again. Their paths crossed when Aiden wandered into the library one rainy afternoon. He wasn't looking for a book, just a place to stay dry. Alara offered him tea and a place to sit, and as the rain fell harder, they talked. About music. About literature. About how silence can sometimes be louder than words. Days turned into weeks. Aiden played guitar under the oak tree outside the library while Alara read him poetry. They shared secrets, smiles, and stolen glances. They were never quite lovers, but never just friends either. There was a fragile thread between them, something unspoken but deeply felt. But Aiden had always been a traveler. And one morning, he left without saying goodbye, leaving behind only a note on her favorite book. Some hearts aren't made to stay, but I carry yours in every chord I play. Alara never cried. Instead, she began writing letters. Every week, she penned a letter to Aiden she would never send. Letters full of the life she lived without him, her father's passing, the book she read, the boy she almost fell for but couldn't. The letters stacked up over the years, filling a wooden box beneath her bed. 10 years passed. Alara was no longer the girl in the library. She had taken her father's place as head librarian and rarely played music or opened her heart. The village was still the same, quiet, timeless, but she was different. Hardened in some ways. Softer in others. One late autumn evening, as the sun melted behind the hills, a familiar tune drifted through the air, faint at first, then clearer. It was the song Aiden used to hum, the one he never finished. She stepped outside. And there he was. Older. Wiser. But still him. I came back, he said softly, holding a weathered notebook. I've written 1,000 songs since I left, but none of them sounded right until now. Alara didn't know what to say. She had imagined this moment 100 times, in dreams, in letters, but now, it felt too real. I never stopped writing to you, she whispered. He smiled. Then maybe it's time to read each other's letters. They sat under the same oak tree, her box of unsent letters beside them, his notebook open between them. They read. They wept. They laughed. And slowly, the space between them, once filled with silence and unsaid words, closed. Love, they discovered, doesn't always happen the way we expect. Sometimes it takes years. Sometimes it hides in unwritten songs and unsent letters. But when it finally arrives, it feels like coming home. Whispers of the Old Bookshop. In the heart of Edinburgh, tucked between cobblestone alleys and ivy-covered brick buildings, stood an old bookshop named Whitaker and Sons. Though the sign was weathered and the windows dusty, the place possessed a quiet charm that drew in wanderers and dreamers. Eleanor Wren, a literature student from London, had stumbled upon the shop during a summer writing retreat. With wild chestnut curls, round glasses, and a satchel filled with poetry, she was the kind of girl who found magic in forgotten places. That afternoon, as rain tapped gently on the roof and jazz music played faintly from a gramophone, she stepped inside, and her life changed. Behind the counter stood a young man, tall and slender, with ink-stained fingers and a worn copy of The Great Gatsby tucked under one arm. His name was Callum Whitaker, the grandson of the shop's founder. He looked up as the bell chimed, and their eyes met, soft brown meeting curious green. "Looking for something in particular?" he asked, voice warm like the scent of old pages. "Just stories," she replied. "The kind that stay with you." Callum smiled. "Aren't we all?" Over the following weeks, Eleanor found herself returning to Whittaker and Sons almost daily. She claimed she was working on her thesis, but the truth was, she'd fallen into a rhythm with Callum, cups of tea shared between the aisles, debates about Bronte versus Austen, long silences that said more than words ever could. Callum had a story of his own. After a devastating breakup and abandoning a career in architecture, he had returned to Edinburgh to rebuild his life among the dusty spines and fading titles. He hadn't believed in love stories anymore, not until Eleanor read one aloud to him, her voice trembling, tears catching in her lashes. One stormy evening, as the lights flickered and thunder rolled through the sky, Eleanor reached for a book on the top shelf. The ladder slipped. Before she could cry out, Callum caught her, his arms around her waist, heart thundering louder than the rain. They didn't kiss. Not then. They stood there, breathless. And for a moment, the world stilled. "I think I'm falling for you," Eleanor whispered, cheeks flushed. Callum touched her cheek gently. "Then let's fall together." The days that followed were slow and golden. They picnicked in the meadows, read poetry under the stars, and wrote letters to each other, even when they were in the same room. The bookshop became their haven, the quiet corner of the world where everything made sense. But time, like seasons, changes. Summer ended. Eleanor's retreat was over. She had to return to London. The night before she left, they sat in the back room of the shop, surrounded by towers of books, afraid to speak of goodbyes. "I don't want this to end," she said. "It doesn't have to," Callum replied, pressing a handwritten letter into her palm. "Come back. Or let me come to you. Just don't let this be the last page." They kissed for the first time then, soft and slow, like a promise. 1 year later, the bell of Whittaker and Sons rang once more. Eleanor stood in the doorway, her suitcase by her side. Callum looked up from behind the counter, that same book in his hands. She smiled. "I'm home."